Go ahead.
Well, right now it's April the 16th at the Aurora Cemetery with Shelly and Monica, and this is the place where one of the alleged first UFO crashes ever occurred in 1897. Now, it's important to sort of understand the background to the case itself. In other words, it actually wasn't sort of a random one in a million event. In the latter part of the 1800s, from the 1880s onwards, there were a lot of reports all across the United States of what became known as phantom airships or phantom balloons. And they were very much sort of like a precursor of the latter day modern UFO wave. And people were talking about things that looked like balloons or airships. They weren't flying saucer shaped or anything like that at all, but they clearly weren't regular balloons that were being flown in the 19th century. Nobody knew what these things were, but they made the newspapers all across the United States, and the reports of people seeing these airships landing and speaking to the crews, and some of them allegedly spoke foreign languages, or what was presumed to be foreign languages. So it's very much like a UFO wave of the modern era. And at the height of it all, in 1897, we had the crash of this object, or alleged crash, in 1897 in Aurora. As far as the story is concerned, it goes that this object, whatever it was flying slow and low over town, and it hit a windmill and exploded, and the fragments were sort of shattered and spread all across the town itself. And obviously Aurora is not a big town, so pretty much all the wreckage was supposedly collected up, and during the course of collecting the wreckage, one of the local townsfolk found this small body, like a dwarfish humanoid body. And there's also talk of the object, or whatever it was, showing like hieroglyphics on the wreckage, as if it was some sort of ancient or unknown language. The story develops from there that reportedly the body of the alien was buried in the cemetery where we are right now. Now, over the years, various places have been put forward for where the body might have been buried, if indeed there actually was one, because there's a great deal of debate about the case in general. But a lot of people over the years have been out here, UFO researchers, looking for the cemetery, looking for the grave, looking for the body. And it reached one point where the police would actually patrol the cemetery because they were basically worried about body snatching. It didn't really matter if it was human body snatching or alien body snatching, it was still body snatching. Now, as far as I know, no one ever came across the body, if indeed there was one. But there are rumours that some of the wreckage that was still strewn around the area, there are stories about men in black types supposedly coming into town in the 1970s and collecting some of the remains of the wreckage. Now, the story actually made the Texas newspapers at the time. So in other words, it wasn't like a latter-day hoax where somebody spun a story and then created it at the time. If you can actually go back to, for example, the Dallas main library and go through the old newspapers there, and they've got the old records of the case on file, and you can make copies of them. So we know it was reported at the time, and that includes the crash, not just the sighting. But there were numerous other sighting reports in and around the Aurora area and Fort Worth and Dallas in the same week of this particular encounter. So in other words, this does add sort of weight to the story. Probably the one person who's done more research into this than anybody else is Jim Mars. Jim actually lives very close to the cemetery. I won't say where in case people all try to descend on his house at once, but he doesn't live far from the cemetery at all. And so he developed a deep interest in this and was able to speak to some of the families of the old timers who were there, just children at the time, and they remembered the incident. So in other words, there's a lot of evidence to back up the fact that something did happen. It wasn't a hoax, it wasn't something spun by the town to bring in tourists or anything like that. But being it so long ago, more than 100 years ago now, the chances are we'll never actually know what really happened and whether or not there really was an alien body buried under the cemetery, and even if it's still there. But today, certainly more than 100 years later, it still has the appeal to the point where people come out and make pilgrimages almost to the cemetery to say they've actually been here. And of course the reason we're here today is because we've got the first annual, hopefully, Aurora Crashed UFO Conference. And I think there's about 300 people here, which shows the interest there is in it, and the fact that it's not going away, which is a good thing. So in other words, it's kind of really developing now in the same way that Roswell embraced its crashed UFO story. Now Aurora's doing exactly the same, and hopefully that'll continue. There are some strange stories attached to the Aurora account. One of them particularly is that when the object crashed, parts of the wreckage, the debris, ended up in a local well. Now, whether or not as it exploded they fell into the well or they got just dumped in there, we don't really know. But there's a very weird and almost sinister story of a guy who lived locally and used the well for water, for drinking water, for washing water as well. And he developed some very strange mutations in his hands, which doesn't actually look like, or didn't look like, the effects of arthritis or anything like that. And a number of researchers have suggested that the wreckage itself, the debris, could have somehow contaminated the local water supply.